Okay. Good morning.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Still just working at home, working away, you
I
know.
know. Are you getting ready for the holidays coming up?
Yes, yes, it feels very different,
Yeah.
but we're still trying to bring about all the Christmas joy,
All of it in one big
all of it.
package.
So how are things
um,
going with the class and everything?
Good. That's what I want to talk to you about today. I this last semester I've been teaching a pediatrics course, and so
Uh-huh.
part of that is writing soap notes, daily documentation,
Ooh,
and
we know the
so
importance of that.
yeah. And so, yeah, over the past several weeks, I've been hitting hard this daily documentation, and it's just so different, than what I thought or what I've thought of in the past, and what even in school that I got that, and I think you would agree on this that like we didn't really realize the importance of daily documentation. I mean, we knew it, but it's really came to light when we're looking at when we went through our audit and we have been reviewing documentation and charts, and so I just have really been emphasizing with my students how important that daily documentation is. It's probably the
Mhm.
most important thing that they do. Not that they just do it, but that they do it well with the important components.
Exactly. I mean, when you look at the different associations and the direction that our different, bodies give us as far as
Mhm.
AOTA and APTA and ASHA give us about documentation, it's that medical necessity and skilled service should lie in every single piece of what you're doing.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes within our practice and the different sites that we have in our own private practice, um, our own teammates or colleagues think that we go overboard with documentation, but I don't think you can take the daily piece too seriously.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think, like you
yeah.
said, we learned that through having to dig out those dates of service. And in our audit, um, they asked for dates of service that were like within the last year,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
then the funding source took probably a year to review them. So by the time we
mhm,
got the decisions back and had to argue any outstanding issues, it had been 2+
mhm.
years since people had seen those kids.
Yeah.
So I really think that therapists don't understand that they may have to look at that note and recall that session from just what they wrote down. So if you're writing 2 or 3 lines, how are you going to remember that?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
how does
yeah,
that stand up?
yeah.
So I'm sure your students were a little
Yeah, I think I
shocked by
scared them a
all of
little bit.
that.
I'm kinda, like, scaring them, but I'm like, "That's okay." Like, we were scared, and so
Yeah.
that's
I don't think
but,
anybody hears the word audit,
and
no matter what it's for, and
yeah,
doesn't get
and
a
like,
little bit
"Oh,
like, "Oh," sick of their
oh."
stomach?
Yeah. Yeah, I taught so one thing that I do with them is, it's kinda nice because I'm reading their note and I have no idea what child they saw, or, because they're usually writing a note, off of a video right now, and so
Uh-huh.
I don't watch the video because I want to look at it, to where I want to be able to read the note and have a good idea what happened without
Mhm.
objectively.
Mhm.
And so one thing I always do to them is I say, okay, if I were if you had, $100 or whatever, and you read this note, would that note be worth would you pay cash for that note? Like,
Yeah,
would you
that's really good.
can you read that note and say, "Oh yeah, I'd be willing to pay out of pocket for this service."
Yeah,
So I tell
for
him that, and I
sure.
say, "Do you also, when you're reading this note, does it look skilled? Does it look like it was a professional that did this, or are you reading a note that looks like anybody could do?" And those are
Yes.
kind of some things. And these are entry level students. They haven't been practicing yet or anything like that, but
Right.
it's just kind of
But
to get them thinking about those
exactly,
things.
and I think we saw the same thing when we were looking at our own providers documentation that
Hmm.
had been out for a long time, that they didn't understand, like, how to document that skill, and that's when you and I came up with the idea of teaching about documentation. And now that has evolved into this whole idea of the focus groups that we teach
Yeah.
documentation, these 6-week courses to defensible daily documentation. And we're working on coming out next year with the evaluation assessment, defensible, assessment and evaluation. But, more often than not, because the amount of times you do we in occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, we use the codes for treatment more than we do for evaluation. Evaluation may come once or twice a year, but all those daily notes are really what comes under scrutiny in an audit, and that's where all of that, all of the recoupment and everything is determined is on those daily sessions. And I know our therapists were spending way more time on evaluation assessment than they were on the daily documentation, and we really tried to get them to understand that there's a balance and how to write. And like I said, that's when we came up with those training courses that moved from the traditional day-long courses to that 6-week course. And why we spaced it out like that, just because it's so much information to apply.
It is. It's a lot.
And making a change to your documentation is hard. I think that's what we found. We've ran this group now this year, I think 4 times. And every time people learn a ton and we see this great change in their notes, but we also, we hear a lot about, this is hard. This is so different, and that's why we give them that time.
It's neat though, seeing like we've seen the focus groups and with the students, that the evolution in their notes from beginning to end. And I know we do this in our focus group, and I do it in my classes too, is really giving them kind of a formula. Makes it a lot easier, because I see them struggle and take long when they have to guess so much, when they're kind of trying to guess, what should go in this section, what should go in that section. And so providing them with a little bit more of a formula of things that should and should not be in different sections, a little bit more black and white, I know makes it a lot easier, to where it can get to where it doesn't take as much time. You can be more efficient while still including those things that matter and not putting in there the things that don't matter. So I know that's been very helpful in the focus groups and with the students. So
I hope people will take a moment to listen to this and join us next year.
It's fun. It's fun getting to meet different people from different states
and learning what they do, and that this impacts everybody. So we've done these focus groups with anybody from pediatrics all the way to rehab, geriatric populations, because documentation requires the same elements for all of us. So
it's funny that you say that, because even the students will be like, oh, well, this is different than when I go to rehab, or I'm like, no, it shouldn't be. Like, this is not a pediatric thing. This should be, across the age span, any type of service that you do. If it's, developmental, if it's rehab, whatever it is, it should fall within the same guidelines. So, so focus groups are super fun. I've really enjoyed getting to know people of all disciplines, OT, PT, speech, throughout,
from all over, everywhere.
That's been, and really everybody's having the same struggle. It's not just here, in Oklahoma, it's all over. So anyway, well, thanks for talking with me about this today. And I will talk to you probably later on today again.
I would imagine so. Seems to be our thing. All right. Bye.